Life with the Greendales is challenging at best, consisting of a 7-year-old boy, Jaden, a deadbeat stepfather, Randall, and me, Mike, 16 years old and a high school dropout. Not like I had a choice. Our mother passed when I was 13, leaving the three of us alone. Without Mom there to support the family, we had to move to a much smaller home, with only 2 bedrooms between us all. Living with Randall wasn't something that Jaden and I were very on board with. The man had always been distant and cold towards us, even when Mom was around. After her passing, it only became worse. Randall picked up drinking as a way to cope and became even more distant. By the time I had turned 15, we were on the verge of losing what little we had due to Randall's unwillingness to stop drinking. This forced me to drop out of school and pick up a job at a local grocery store, which hired at 15 years old. With my added income, we've been able to keep up our dingy home and not much else. However, Jaden's 8th birthday was coming up, and I wanted to do something special for him. Spending money is almost never a thing for us here. Randall always makes me show him my paychecks and make sure I'm giving him all the money I earned. Some of this money goes to bills, most to alcohol. However, this year, I had an ace up my sleeve. About 2 months ago, I had helped an older man to his car after he bought his groceries. I loaded up his trunk for him, and the man was generous enough to give me a $20 tip. This made me ecstatic, because this I could hide from Randall. Knowing what I had to do, I hid the bill under my mattress when I got home, tucking it away so deep that it would never reasonably be found unless being looked for. 2 months passed and I had safely kept the money a secret. Jaden's birthday was coming up tomorrow. I brought the $20 to work with me and went to the toy store next door after my shift. I bought 2 packs of Pokemon cards for Jaden, as he loved Pokemon, and was always talking about the other kids at school playing with the cards. After that, I had $10 left, and I knew exactly what I was going to do for my brother. The day of the birthday arrived. I wished my brother a happy birthday before he got on the bus for school. Jaden wasn't expecting anything. He never does. He's never had any reason to, which made me even more excited to make his day as special as I could. It just so happened I was off of work this day, so I was able to go to Jaden's school and wait for him to leave as school was ending. Waiting outside the school doors, Jaden looked really confused when he saw me standing outside. He walked up to me and asked, "What are you doing here? Is everything okay?" I told him that everything was fine and that we were going to walk home today. Despite taking a completely different route to get home, Jaden took my word for it when I told him we were simply taking a shortcut. After about 5 minutes, we were exactly where I wanted to be. McDonald's. As we were passing the restaurant, Jaden longingly looked at it, not saying anything. He knew we couldn't ever afford to eat there. But today, he was in for a surprise. I couldn't help but smile. I stopped and Jaden slowed down. "Want to go?" I asked. The initial reaction was confusion. He didn't ask, but I knew what he was thinking. Before he could question me, I reached in my pocket and pulled out a $10 bill left over from the Pokemon cards. You should have seen his face. You could see the happiness wash over him. "I hear they have Pokemon toys with the kids' meals right now," I said. That was all it took. Jaden grabbed my arm, and we were now running towards the McDonald's. I ordered him a kid's meal and an ice cream cone. He got a Pikachu toy with his meal, and I could have sworn it was the happiest I'd ever seen him. It was about to get better, though. I reached into my backpack and said, I think I might have something you'll like." I pulled out the Pokemon cards and put them on the table. Jaden gasped. This was probably the most that has been done for him since Mom died. He ran over to my side of the booth and gave me a hug, but didn't take his eyes off the Pokemon cards. It was then that he stopped, and for the first time in the past half hour, his smile faded. "What's wrong? Are these not good?" I asked, unsure if I had made a bad decision with his gift. "Who is that? Why is he looking at us?" Jaden asked. I turned around to see a tall, skinny man standing against the wall across the restaurant, looking right at us. The man wore a black and white striped shirt, like a prisoner would wear, and a red tie. Looking at his face, he was wearing a black hat and a blindfold with 2 holes cut out. I recognized this man as the Hamburglar, one of the McDonald's mascots. "He's giving me the creeps," said Jaden. I could see why he was creeped out. This particular man wearing the Hamburglar outfit seemed just a little off. He didn't have the build that you would usually see the Hamburglar with. The man was tall, lanky, and pale. Jaden was getting worked up at this point. While I could understand it, I knew it was just a harmless mascot, so I told Jaden, "He's just a part of the McDonald's crew. Maybe we can invite him over and he'll wish you happy birthday." At my approval, Jaden seemed to calm down, and his smile slowly came back as he said, "Oh, sure." I waved at the Hamburglar and motioned him to come over. At first he just stood still and stared for a solid 5 seconds. He blinked very slowly and started walking over. His movements were smooth. He took large, almost comical steps towards us, like a burglar sneaking around trying not to wake anyone. When he got to our booth, he glanced at me, then looked at Jaden and smiled widely, like he was forcing the biggest smile he could. He said nothing, though. It's my brother's birthday, and I was wondering if you could sing happy birthday for him." He shook his head no, and instead silently pulled out a piece of paper out of his pocket and handed it to me. It read, "McDonald's Birthday Kid Club. Enter your name, address, and birthday to receive a free gift every year on your special day." Upon seeing this, Jaden, without hesitation, grabbed the paper from the lanky burglar's hand and started filling it out. At the time, I just figured it was some sort of company policy for the actors not to talk or sing, so it didn't seem out of the ordinary. Upon completing the paper, Jaden handed it to the Hamburglar actor and beamed at him, as if expecting a free toy on the spot. It was about that time that I looked at my watch and saw that it was getting too late to avoid suspicion from Randall, so I told Jaden it was time to wrap it up and head home. Upon me saying this, the Hamburglar waved goodbye to Jaden, gave him a quick pat on the shoulder, and walked away back to where he was before, still using his strange, sneaky walk. It was sunset by the time Jaden and I got home. Approaching our house, Randall's car was absent, meaning he probably wouldn't be home until tomorrow. As we neared closer to the driveway, Jaden gasped. "I forgot the Pokemon cards at McDonald's," he said with anxiety in his voice. I stopped and for the first time in a while, felt mad at Jaden. The madness quickly dissolved, however. I couldn't stay angry at him. With all the poor kid has to deal with, I sighed. "Alright, let's walk back to McDonald's and check for them. It's going to be dark on the way, so stay close to me, alright?" Jaden nodded and let out a quiet, "Sorry." By the time we returned to McDonald's, the sun had set. Jaden went in first, running to the table we had been at to look for the cards. I was just as anxious to find them as he was. To our dismay, there was no sign of them. They were not where we had left them. "Let's ask a worker if they found it. Maybe they're keeping them for you." Jaden nodded slowly, not saying anything. I took his hand and we made our way to the counter. There was a teenage girl at the register, looking bored more than anything. "Hey, excuse me, by any chance did anyone find any Pokemon cards at the table over there?" I asked. She shook her head. "No, sorry. Haven't had anything like that." Jaden started tearing up again. "Well, where's the Hamburglar? He was in the area and even talked to us. Maybe he saw what happened to him." "The who?" the girl at the register questioned. "You know, the Hamburglar, the mascot you guys had in here earlier. He signed us up for some birthday club." The girl stared blankly for a second, and then said, "We don't have mascots here. My manager said we used to back in the 90s, but we haven't had any here for years. I don't even think the Hamburglar's part of the McDonald's crew anymore, actually." My stomach dropped. Who was the man we talked to? Before I could process it, the girl at the counter said, "Look, we're about to close. Come back tomorrow, and I'll tell the janitorial crew to be on the lookout for them." I nodded. I could tell Jaden was heartbroken, but he was a trooper. He smiled and held my hand as we walked out of the restaurant. The walk home was quiet, and the disappointment in the air was palpable. Returning to our house after the fun day was a harsh reminder of reality. Going inside, it was quiet, assuring us Randall wasn't home. Jaden went in first and headed into the kitchen to get some water. I was on my way to the bedroom when I heard him.
"Mike, I found my cards."
I ran into the kitchen to an elated Jaden, holding 2 packs of Pokemon cards.
"Where were those?"
I asked, confused but relieved.
"They were just here on the table,"
Jaden said. At that point, I was less relieved, retracing our steps in my mind, to think how they possibly could have gotten there. My heart sank as I made the connection of what had happened. It was about this time a figure approached from the front door. Tall, skinny, the classic hat and mask. It was him, the Hamburglar. This time, however, he carried with him a large brown sack. He loomed in front of the doorway, unmoving. I was speechless. It took Jaden longer to realize that he was there, but when he did, he let out a shocked gasp, dropped his cards and hid behind me.
"What are you doing here?"
I asked, terrified. The man said nothing. He simply looked at us and smiled.
"What do you want?"
I screamed, as if begging for a response. While he still said nothing, he now moved. He slowly reached into his brown sack, my heart racing, knowing this could potentially be a very bad situation. I know Jaden was scared, but I don't think he knew how bad this was. The Hamburglar slowly pulled his hand out of the sack and revealed a freshly wrapped McDonald's burger. Putting it in the palm of his hand, he outstretched his arm and presented it to us. In a quiet, shrill voice, he let out one word.
"Eat." "We aren't going to eat that. Are you insane?"
I shouted at him. He looked angry and reached out his arm and slapped me as hard as he could. The smack could probably be heard outside the house even. He yelled again in a much deeper, raspier voice.
"Eat or else."
My face stung. I was in pain, and I knew at this point I had no choice. If I complied, maybe Jaden could remain safe. I reluctantly reached out my arm and grabbed the burger from him. He looked pleased. There didn't seem to be anything inherently wrong with the burger. He continued to stare, and I knew what I had to do. Slowly raising the burger to my mouth, I took a bite. It was surprisingly good. It didn't taste like the burgers I was used to, but it was by no means bad. He continued staring after the bite, and I knew he wasn't satisfied. I was going to have to eat the entire thing, so for Jaden's sake, I ate it. All of it. If it weren't for the man staring me down, I might have actually even enjoyed it. When I was finished, the man smiled. He gave me a pat on my shoulder and looked down at Jaden.
"Don't even think of touching him,"
I told the man. He simply smiled at Jaden and said,
"You're free now."
He turned around and walked out. I watched him leave out the front door, and as soon as he was out of sight, I slammed it shut, locking it and barricading it with chairs. I went to hug Jaden and told him to go to our room. He just sat in there scared, too afraid to speak even, terrified he might hear us and come back. We must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember is being woken up by a knocking at the door.
"Shoot, Randall's going to be upset. I locked him out."
I ran towards the door and opened it up, preparing myself for screaming in anger. To my surprise, when I opened the door, the police were there. I was confused. Before I could get a chance to speak, the officer at the door looked at me and frowned. He started talking.
"Hey son, I'm afraid I have some bad news for you. We think we might have found the body of your stepdad. We're going to need you to identify it."
I was shocked. Jaden hadn't woken up yet. I figured I would let him sleep. So I went to the police station with the officer alone. I was taken to one of those rooms where the dead bodies are kept when I got there. There was a large table in the middle of the room with what looked like a body covered by a sheet on it. The officer, in a grim tone, said,
"Now look, kid, this isn't pretty. I wouldn't be doing this to you if we had anyone else who could identify this man."
The officer pulled back the sheet, and it was worse than what I was expecting. It was Randall, all right. A mangled Randall at that. I could recognize his face, but his body looked like it had been mutilated, harvested.
"We found this on the scene."
The officer reached into his pocket and pulled out a sheet of paper with Jaden's name on it. When he opened it, it read,
"Hope you have the happiest of birthdays. From the McDonald's Birthday Kid Club."